A lot of what I do to take care of myself now seems like what we all should be taught to do to take care of ourselves generally. It's not about healing, it's about understanding and maximizing energy.
Hello, and welcome to Art Restart, where we explore how artists are reinventing their fields and building a new landscape for the arts. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, the producer and editor of this podcast, which is brought to you by the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. In this episode, we'll be speaking with cellist Joshua Roman. Now, I don't believe any chronic illness has a silver lining. Rather, it tests the sufferer's ability to come to terms with and adapt to a radically new reality. Joshua had to do just that when, after experiencing several months of overwhelming fatigue 5 years ago, he was diagnosed with long COVID. Up to then, Joshua had already carved a unique niche in the classical music world. A former principal cellist of the Seattle Symphony turned soloist and curator, he'd built a career that combined artistic excellence with a passionate commitment to making music relevant and accessible. But suddenly, he could literally no longer pick up his instrument. In the years since he became ill, thanks to a variety of therapies and a consistent curiosity in his illness, he's gradually found a way to return to his instrument and music making. And on that path to recovery, he's been forced to reevaluate the very foundations of his artistry. The result is a new clarity and focus, not only about which projects deserve his limited energy, but also what kind of artistic legacy he wants to build. His latest initiative, the Immunity Project, exemplifies this shift. Drawing directly from his personal experience of illness and recovery, he is curating a collection of performances and reflections that foreground music's emotional and restorative capacity. The project now also includes a recently released album titled Immunity, on which Joshua plays pieces of music from a variety of genres that in some way have been crucial to him in his ongoing recovery journey. Knowing how he has to marshal his limited energy for every engagement and activity, including this interview, I started off by asking him if he's still able to practice the cello regularly.
Yes, I am. One of the interesting things that's changed, and this is kind of opening up a different path of conversation that we'll probably get into later, but my practicing is very different now. So yesterday, all I did was improvisation. I'm not really sure what I'm going to try to tackle today because my next performance is pretty low key. It's repertoire that I've done over and over again. I know like the back of my hand. And in the past, I would have thought every day is a day that I have to improve in a technical, measurable, visible way, or else I'm falling behind. Now my focus is on the relationship with the cello and the trust that's there. And this week has felt really good in terms of that. And so I'm not feeling like today is a day that I have to push it. If anything, it'll be a relaxed session of joy, improvising, or maybe learning something new, or who knows?
Boy, that's, you bring up something very frightening, I think. The possibility of falling behind. You must have been living with that for a while now.
Well, yes, I'm curious how many of your listeners would relate to some of the things that have been running through my head and floating around there for as long as I can remember. Things like practice makes perfect, which my dad would revise into perfect practice makes perfect. You can't just sit there and play. It has to be what you're going to do. And then Heifetz, and I'm sure I'm getting this wrong at this point. I've never bothered looking it up, but it was drilled into me. Heifetz is saying, if I miss 1 day of practice, I know. If I miss 2 days, the critics know. If I miss 3 days, the whole world knows.
Right.
And it's that idea that it's such a fragile point. You know, you're only good as here's another one. You're only as good as your last performance. Okay. Does that mean that spending an uncountable number of hours working on quote unquote bettering your ability to play your instrument is what's going to make the next performance better. Well, it depends. It depends on what the problem was. And that's where I think a lot of these things fall short. I've known that for a long time. I've always had a kind of analytical approach to practicing, not always to playing, but to what is the purpose of practicing? But more and more, I'm realizing how much of practicing has been driven by an insecurity rather than a focus on building security, trust.
And you said something, a beautiful phrase, that this afternoon you're gonna sit with in a relaxed session of joy.
Yes.
Which sounds
Yes.
like that alone has so much value.
It's amazing. I think that's one of the most important things that's happened for my relationship with music and in some ways with myself. There's still a lot of work to do, both in terms of understanding this process of evolution for me, but also still a lot, there's always work to do on the cello. I'm not denying that, but it's the focus. And I think there's been a big shift, and it started with me being away from the cello for a while and then having a revelation, coming back and seeing it as a long lost friend in a way, rather than something that I was so accustomed to being around that I kind of took elements of it for granted. But then that revelation alone changed a lot of things, but it was really the decision to act on that in particular ways. And the biggest one is that I do my best to not practice unless I really want to play the cello. And I have to ask myself before I take the cello out of its case, is this coming from a place of insecurity or desire? It's a layered, complicated, nuanced question with answers that can vary, but simply asking that question has made my relationship with the cello so much healthier and actually helped my playing, helped my focus while practicing, helped my ability to be comfortable on stage. There's so much that has grown, even technically, which is counterintuitive. But again, it's that basis of trust versus insecurity.
I feel like there's a lesson there for any instrumentalist, not only people who are suffering with a chronic illness. What would you tell an overachieving instrumentalist like you once were and still are in many ways about what you've learned about your relationship with your instrument lately?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think I'm going to be a broken record here, and I'll expound on it, but I would just always go back to, is this going to build trust, or is this going to increase this dependence on check marks and verification and exacerbate an underlying insecurity? It's a really complicated way of saying, does it feel like I'm trying to do something or trying to make sure that I don't do something? And that don't do something is play out of tune, just a big list of no-nos. Like, are you picking up your instrument with a list of don'ts or a list of do's? And it's not about playing your scales. Like, sure, play your scales. When you play your scales, what are you paying attention to? Can you find things in the garden of your relationship with your instrument to water, to care for, to tend? You are going to pull some weeds. But if you just focus on weeding day in and day out, then not only are you neglecting the flowers, you might even end up pulling some of them out.
But you work, however, in a field that is very competitive and where people who hire musicians actually do like the check marks. So
Yes.
I'd love to talk about how you've shifted your view of what you wanted your career to be since you contracted long COVID.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because I think for me, really not a lot has changed in terms of my drive, what I might call my mission, why I play the cello. It has simply become more clear. And it's become easier for me to say no to things that don't fit that. Whereas in the past, I might have for logical or illogical reasons, contorted to fit other molds that weren't really, first of all, they weren't feeding my heart. But then after that, they also weren't helping me build the career, because the career you build is the career you have. So if you're doing that by saying yes to things that are not it, that's what's going to keep coming to you. There's no magic point at which you can say, well, now I've made it by doing this, and so I'm suddenly going to change everyone's perception of me and be this other kind of artist. No, your career is your reputation. So that's what you build. And that's the thing that has been most helpful to me, is this sense of clarity around my ability to determine that. And not that that means that I can get every gig I want. That's still difficult. That's still a challenge, especially for a cellist. But it does mean that I have a much stronger sense of self-confidence in what I'm putting out there. And if it's not resonating with other people, then that's okay. But I feel good about what I'm pursuing, and I'm not playing some game, even though there still has to be strategy and I have to understand tactics and the career mechanisms. It's about doing the thing that I love, not about doing something else to please people so that maybe I can pivot and do the thing that I love.
You mentioned a mission, which I'd love to hear more about. What has your mission been as a cellist, and does it ever shift?
It's a good question about the shifting. So I grew up in a Christian family. I'm from Oklahoma. My parents both worked in the church. I am not religious myself. And that's something that definitely shifted in my teens. But early on, I felt the cello like a kind of calling. And it's really difficult for me to stay away from that kind of religious language because of how I grew up and because of how deep it feels and how early it was in my life. I don't remember not playing that cello. I remember when the cello arrived, the UPS lady in her brown shorts, I could see her through the glass door. I was 3 years old. She looked so tall. That cello was so big. It was a quarter size. It wasn't that big, but it was so exciting. But I'm sure I remember a couple of things before that, but I don't remember the cello not being there as a thing. And it was very early on that I was telling people this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I had very kind of naive and grand ambitions that somehow if you do this and you give yourself to it in a really powerful way, and again, I think this is very much informed by the religious culture that I was in, you can be a vessel that transforms people's lives. And that's something that I think there are times, and this is where the shifting of mission comes in. There are times when that felt like a very direct, if you play in a way where God or Bach or spirituality or whatever it is, the vibrations are pure, whatever you're doing, if you play in such a way that that is just flowing perfectly through you, there's no way anyone could hear that and not be transformed by that experience immediately, like a life-changing realization, which is, again, I think a very beautiful but naive, simplified. There's something in music that is incredibly powerful, but that was a way to put immense pressure on myself and this need to see an immediate, irrevocable impact in people listening to me, which is it's a lot to handle. Later on, as I moved away from the religious aspects of that, it still had this underneath, this idea that music is a service, that we do this because it is good, because it helps people. And also that it's not inherent, that music can be used for so many purposes, commercial purposes, even music that militaries will use to rally the soldiers. You could say that that's doing something positive in one sense, it's giving them energy and hope. In another sense, to defend themselves or to attack others. It's not it's not predetermined that all music is inherently just good. So really thinking about the music that I play, what is it for? How can I see what it's doing for people? That's really where the shifts have come. And it wasn't until long COVID took away my ability to just throw energy at that question and forced me to really choose and make decisions, that I found that my answer is really, it's really there. Like what I'm doing now is I'm exploring that basic question. What is the power of music? And for me, it begins from a very personal place and a very personal and profound moment of experiencing the power of music myself, even as a musician who is so close to that, in that relationship, that at times it can be a little, I don't know the word for it, but when you're behind the curtain, or you can see how the soup is made or the sausage is made or all of that, that can make us a little jaded in a way, even if we still feel and think that our hearts are in the right place. And I had an experience where I was incredibly moved by music and realized my mission is not to know and not to, and also not to avoid this question, but actually to put it front and center. What is the power of music?
And certainly one way you answer that through your illness is to put out an album, right? Immunity.
Yes.
What have you learned? It's a beautiful and very eclectic album. You sing on it, I think, at least twice, which I'm sure
Yes.
you wouldn't have imagined you would have recorded yourself singing.
Never. Oh, it's wild. It's wild.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
tell me about that experience. What were your original thoughts about what that album would be, and how nimble did you have to be as you put it together?
I think the music itself, each piece came to me for a different reason, but they kind of came together because a friend asked me to perform a very specific kind of concert, which was developed for Princeton University, where she works, for their concert series. And it's a new series that they started called Healing with Music. And the idea was a musician that had undergone some kind of profoundly changing life circumstance would make a program of the music that had healed them, I think was the original prompt. And they would perform that music and maybe even talk about it. And it was really interesting. There was already a lot kind of swirling in the water, but I hadn't thought to put it all together and be on stage and present this. Here it is, face value. I'm not going to filter it through some historical lens or try to come up with a clever intellectual approach for this. This is simply the music that has been, in my case, not necessarily healing, but the music that has been important to me on this very difficult health journey that I'm on. And here's a piece of music. Here's why it's important to me. And that basic approach is what I did for that concert. It's what I carried through the rest of the project.
Yeah, so tell me about the overall project.
So the Immunity project the album is a part of this project, and it's something that is malleable enough for me to take to the main stage of the Mothership TED conference, to the Oslo Freedom Forum, to Aspen Ideas Health, also Carnegie Hall Wellbeing concerts, main stages of random wonderful presenting. I shouldn't say random. I mean, they are kind of random, but wonderful presenting series that are into it, and also residencies at Stanford, Yale, Juilliard. And the thing about this is it allows me to explore this question, the power of music, but also to have a very kind of limited. I'm able to ask a lot of questions and get a huge amount of kinds of engagement while still showing up with this. Basically, there are some variations, but with the same repertoire, the same underlying question from the project. Really, me being the same me, rather than doing one thing here and then 2 days later doing something completely different somewhere else.
You get to continue defining your mission rather than letting people who book you define it.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean that I don't take things that people ask me to do. It means they're filtered through a different process. And in the end, it's just so much easier. And what that has allowed, which is really exciting, as I was saying, is this not only career growth, but also artistic and personal growth, because I'm less distracted by constantly feeling like there's something else that I'm supposed to be working on. So I'm working on this right now, and there's something else that's coming up next. In the meantime, little, I'm calling it little just because it's one weekend, but little is big, but little projects like premiering a new concerto with the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. In the past, I would have been doing 10 different kinds of programs in the 3 weeks before. And now I was able to focus on that, really give it what it needed, and maintain the project throughout.
And your colleagues, the people who work with you, have been able to adapt to your new needs.
Yes. In fact, a lot of the things that I do now have, initially there'll be well, okay, yeah, sure, we can definitely do whatever you need. And then later people will start reminding me to do it. And then sometimes, maybe even often, I'll be taken aside and say, you know what, I'm really glad you're doing this because it just makes everything so much easier. Things like I set a timer for 45 minutes and then we take a little break. And it just gives everyone in the room a sense of time that isn't rushed, but we don't wander off kind of just chatting and end up spending 8 hours rehearsing when really we only rehearsed for 2. A lot of what I do to take care of myself now seems like what we all should be taught to do to take care of ourselves generally. It's not about healing, it's about understanding and maximizing energy. It's not specific to long COVID, even though it is very helpful for long COVID. It's just generally what makes human beings function at their best. And that's been really interesting to see. And I feel like has changed my ability to be present for the better and my ability to deliver for the better. And the people that I work with, by and large, seem to really appreciate that kind of structure.
Since you've contracted long COVID, you've become an expert in the disease because you've done a lot of different therapies and talked to so many doctors. Along the way, have you found a network or community of musicians with chronic illness or disability? And if so, what is the most important thing for them to be changed in the music ecosystem?
Wow. I mean, that's such a perfect question, because I've had interactions with a lot of people who are dealing with long COVID or other chronic illnesses, or even things like tendinitis. And it feels like people are more open, maybe in general after COVID, but especially with me, because I've put it out there that I've got this going on. And that's what I would say we need to be more accepting of the human element of performance, because the reality that it's there, whether we like it or not. I think about what someone might wonder when they're about to hire me, like, oh, he's got long COVID, he's got fatigue and brain fog. Is he going to be able to do this thing on the day we hire him to do it? Well, there are so many other conditions, whether they're physical or mental or emotional or substance related. There are so many things going on with people that are either hidden or very carefully managed and worked around. This is just another one of those. And it is interesting to me to think about what it would be like to try to hide it in the way that I think so many people feel they need to when something is human about them, whether it is a physical or any other kind of ailment. And I just don't think we're doing ourselves any long-term favors by focusing on this idea of being immune that on stage you should be immune from being human. And that's not to say that I'm okay with getting on stage and not performing well. I'm absolutely not. But I'm managing my ability to do that now better than I ever did before, because I'm being very open and honest, not only with others, but with myself, about my ability from day to day, from moment to moment. And paying attention to that is turning into an incredible strength rather than something that could sneak up on me. And that's, I think, my message to people is not that you need to. I'm not asking people to come out. I know it's very scary to risk what other people are going to say or think, especially in a gig economy, when you say that there's something wrong with you. But if you're somebody who is in a position of hiring other people, especially, then really think about what that does and the long-term relationships that you're building with the human beings that you work with, what the point of what you do is, and ask yourself how you can make space for people to be honest about where they are so that they can actually really truly perform their best and feel their best with you.
If you'd like to learn more about Joshua and read a longer version of this interview, just head to uncsa.edu/artrestart. And I'd love it if you'd share this episode with a friend you think would appreciate it. There are wonderful words of wisdom here for artists working in any field, I think. And please rate and or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is by Shanghai Restoration Project. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, and on behalf of the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts, thank you for listening.